Hi.
Morning.
I'm sorry, I look like a person from a horror movie. It's just that like everyone else is asleep, so I just that's fine. I could just do it on with lights turned off. So I look like a person from a horror movie. So sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks for the debate this morning.
And how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just starting my day.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing well. Just starting my day before I go to. I have to go to work after this. So.
Okay. Uh-huh. I'll probably get back to sleep after this. Okay, so I guess we should start.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So the school should not use a standardized taste. Um, so for me, this debate is like, in a way, kind of personal, like, in a way, because like when I actually when I went through the standardized tastings and all, like what I felt in a personal level, and what how I realized that it is not important, or maybe it is not actually measuring the caliber of a student. And I think that is why this topic popped up in my mind, that this is something I've always wanted to discuss, because this is something I've felt in a personal level as well. But I'll definitely not just be like, presenting a personal approach in this debate, just to like, let you know that this has a personal association with me as well. And so, talking about standardized tasting, how I define standardized tasting is that the taste that is administered and scored in a consistent or a standard manner, a taste that requires all taste takers to answer the same questions, um, or the selection of questions from common bank and in the same way. And now those kind of like questions are scored in a standard or consistent manner, which actually makes it possible to compare the relative performance of individual. So that is how it is defined. And um, I think the context today is that standardized tastes are playing a great role in developing or providing the opportunity of a good education. So if you see, you have high stakes of SATs and everything, and if in case like you want to get to a good university, to a study, and like you have to have a good SAT, or like or those kind of tests. My idea is more of the more focused on SATs and all the aptitude tests. And so like it is playing a great role in like giving people opportunity. And I think that's so my case is that it has become the central of how our educational system works, and it does not deserve to be that center as like my main idea, or core idea on this one. And there are a lot of things that are actually being carried out with this, how the fact that it is not actually measuring the caliber of a student, how there are like people who are actually being disadvantaged, or maybe there are groups who are being disadvantaged by this system. And I think it's just putting a lot of pressure on students, and it's just unnecessary. And throughout my debate, I'll be explaining that as well. So what this is doing is that this is also creating an immense loss in terms of educational value and self-judgment in people and students and in schools themselves. So that's my kind of like, that's my idea on this debate. Yeah, I'd like to hear from you, I guess, on what you particularly feel about this.
I'm actually not a big fan of standardized tests, and if I was talking to the high school Julian, he would probably be really surprised that I'm debating this today. But the title of the debate is that the schools shouldn't use the test,
Mhm.
and I see this both ways. Basically, is what I'm saying. So I think that there's problems with the test, but I believe that they need to be. I believe that they need that it's a call for reform, not ending the test. And the reason that I believe that goes back to your argument, that how do you measure and compare?
Mhm.
Without these tests, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you hold teachers accountable who aren't doing the job. I don't know what the standard is. And even if you look at, I know that one argument what would be more of a pro argument, not on your side, would be that that No Child Left Behind was a failure, and the idea was that we would be able that uh, the students would excel in math and science in comparison to other countries, and it didn't do that. But the thing is that we dropped down. I think we were in the teens, and then now we're all the way. I think it's like 27 or something compared to
Mhm.
Asian countries like China and Japan. The thing is that China and Japan also use standardized tests. So there's no way to measure this. Another criticism that I hear a lot is that the tests don't measure creativity or uh, they're not problem solving responses. But the focus of the test is math and science. So it is problem solving, and it is a measurement of learning, because it's, well, what are you going to go and what can you show me that you learned? And I'm not quite sure what you're breaking up a little bit when you're talking about the SAT and I think the ACT test, but and of course that's the same idea. Um, so I'm not. Maybe your reform could target more towards those areas of the SAT and ACT. The only thing I would say about that is, I mean, I know in my high school experience, and this might be cultural, but it was a public school, and there were two programs. There was a program for students who planned on going to college that would focus on the SAT and ACT and that sort of thing, and there was a program for kids that didn't plan on going to college. So they didn't need if they didn't want to jump through all the hula hoops. They didn't plan on doing that. They had other, they just planned on entering into a more working class field or whatever. They didn't have to do that. So I think that the school would need to use the test. I do believe they need to be reformed. Um, uh, and I think that they measure learning, and they do measure creativity, because not only do you have math and science are about problem solving, but at the same time, there's written responses that people actually read, that they actually hire people, that's their job, they actually read these and assess these, and even debate them with each other if it's on the line, or maybe one person so that it's actually real people read these, and they get together, and they try to do it the best that they can. There's no real perfect way of scoring or analyzing the test, of course, but I think that they really are, that they are using the best method possible. And a lot of the criticisms that I hear really just seem to be more of a call for reform, which I totally agree with.
Mhm.
And I think when I say it both ways, that's really what I'm saying. I'm saying that, well, you have to measure it somehow, especially if you're going to try to get America, like if you want America to be able to compete with other
Mhm.
countries and like China and Japan. But yeah, it maybe it does need reformed for a lot of good reasons.
Okay, okay. I actually got your point in this one, so I will talk about your points accordingly, and I guess move to my points as well. So I think when you say that it is a problem solve, like it actually teaches people, like, or help people learn problem solving, or maybe practice problem solving. So in this case, like, what I would say is that it has a limited area, like a limited content. So I don't think that would actually be, even if in case oh, let me just get back to you later on this. I'm just pretty confused, but the idea is that even if it teaches problem solving, it's a very confined area, and then it cannot actually be, like, it cannot actually be considered, like, I'm not actually getting so much into this, but I'll get back to it. I have points for this one as well. So what my points are on this is that, so those kind of tastes, they measure achievement, not ability, and that's my problem with this. And the second one is that it creates, or it shows wrong differentiation or maybe the wrong comparison. So that's my problem with this. So when I say it measures achievement, not ability. So what there was a statement given by a person who says you in terms of like a standardized tastes, you prepare for the taste to prepare for the taste to prepare for the taste, so like it's a vast preparation that goes on for this taste, and then it's merely an achievement. It's not what you are able of. It's what you what you can achieve with like you know the kindness that like you actually prepare for this taste, as I said, as I given the definition itself, like there's um question banks and everything, and then everyone in the world is actually going to answer the same questions, and then you are like preparing for it. In fact, what happens is that when people are actually pushed or actually required to keep their mind in these kind of tastes, like even students are diverted from their like ongoing classes as well. So I've seen my friends who are just now in the getting into the junior level. Now they are actually trying to prepare for their standardized taste for their graduate level, which is 2 years far. So by which I mean is that there's so much of pressure on this one. There's so much of pressure to achieve a high score so that you can actually get into a good college, and then it's 2 years ahead. Like it's so rigorous. If you see, like, the now what happens is that the person is himself like diverting from, or maybe like giving a focus on something that is not even so much necessary. And I think even like Obama actually made a statement that so many students today are giving like unnecessary exams, to which he actually referred to this kind of taste. So there are two different kind of taste which falls in the standardized taste. The first would be the aptitude taste, and then the second would be the achievement taste. So now what happens, like, let's see what happens if in case we start using the um standard achievement taste. So that is how you are evaluating a school's performance on basis of these kind of taste. So now if that happens, now what the teachers do would be, like, what the teachers would do is that they would just teach to the taste, teach for the taste. They would not actually care about the students' overall learning potential, because now they are actually at stake, because they know that if in case the student is not scoring higher, what happens is that they will be responsible for it, or maybe they will be blamed for it. So now with the stakes getting higher and higher for teachers, this the practice actually for teaching to the taste, not learning, is actually going to happen. The sad reality is that it fosters an atmosphere that is boring and that lacks creativeness as well, because I'll be talking about it later, because it actually confines the sphere of even exams. Even though there is an open section for writing, or even though there isn't, there is a section for problem solving, these are not actually going to you know uplift creativeness. And teachers now have such pressure to get their students ready for these exams, and that they neglect to teach the students skills that go beyond the taste. Now this is what the problem comes with the achievement taste. Now in terms of the aptitude taste, as I said, it measures achievement, not ability. The aptitude tastes are given for a certain reason, a reason that if in case a student scores this, they are going to actually identify or maybe guess like how the student is going to perform in the college, so that's why it is done. And I think it does not measure it in any way. I have my friends, even in my case, like I maybe it's because I could not ever achieve a good one, score on this one, and I have my friends who could actually do it. But I know that if in case we are both put on a practical platform, we are both put on a platform where we have to showcase our skills, maybe in terms of writing or maybe speaking or anything. I know that I am way ahead of him or her. So the thing is that it is not measuring the exact ability, it is um just measuring what people um are actually repetitively practicing just to actually play on a good score. So it's so if you see now what is the problem existing with this as well, is that so it is tasting evaluating a student's performance on one particular day, and then it does not take into account any external factors. So there are many people who simply do not perform well on taste. If in case you see, I was the person who was not a kind of an exam person. I would always panic, or even though I knew the answers, I'd not actually be able to do it, because that's how it goes with me. So when many of the students are smart, they understand the content easily, but it doesn't show on the taste, like, and so many students, they actually develop anxiety. And then the thing is that in terms of a standardized taste, like, it's not, we should not, like, we're not just solely talking about the content of the taste, but to the way they're administered as well. So there are time limits and everything on standardized taste, which is very pressurizing. They are maintaining a uniform environment, and which is even more pressurizing. So there are no external, like, there are so many external factors that play into the test performance. Um, and even if you see, like, if a student has an argument with their parents this the morning of the test, chances are their focus is not going to be where it should be. So the factor, what I'm considering, is that it is not actually measuring an ability of a student. And standardized tests were actually invented or maybe started for that reason, and this reason is not being fulfilled, and it's merely an achievement, not an ability, and it is not actually contributing any way to the educational value your school would be giving to the student. So that's why my main idea is that schools shouldn't use it, because they're not actually getting an idea of how able a student is, and even they are disbenefiting themselves as well with this.
Okay. Going into problem solving, you say that it measures achievement and not ability. Um, the thing that I see with the problem that I see with this is that even if the student is being challenged to study hard and regurgitate, it's still about performance. And that's a performance that they would need to repeat in college, and certainly in their career and the job market. They would have to show the work and do the initiative. Um, and it's and again, I say that there's no perfect way of that I know of doing this, and I think it should be reformed. But I just don't know a better way. It's that so it's so they have to work for this, and then they're being assessed on the work that they do. So that plays into college and the job market. Um, and I think a lot of it really goes back to when I say it's need that the tests need reform more than that they shouldn't exist. Um, because like when you say it doesn't measure creativity, math is problem solving, and the written responses to reading and writing, creativity might be one of the things that the students actually judged on. And then even when I was a student in art school, actually, a lot of art school, not the entirety of art school, but the first year or two of art school, it kind of varies on the program, but at least for the first year, it's considered a foundation year. And even though it's art school, everything about it's actually quantitative. So you do a series of projects that are very competitive, that will keep you up every night, where you have to go in and the work is assessed quantitatively. There is something that you're supposed to learn from each one of these projects, an art theory, a theory about art, if that's color or space, etc. You have to bring this project in and show that you understand that, not only that you understand that concept, because an art historian might understand that concept, but that you can apply it. And that's what you're measured on. And it's really agony, because you don't really get to use your creativity, but at the same time, it's quantitative, and in the long run, it empowers you to be able to think and do those things to make to make stronger projects, because all the students who go through this foundation year will tell you that they can't believe how much better their art got, as much as they really didn't like doing the projects. And I think that's a lot like standardized testing. So I'm using an analogy.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's a measurement of performance, and and I think that does add educational value. Get into your third point, because there's no way to compare. There's no way to know if a teacher's underperforming. Yeah, how do you know? How do you create students that are able to compare, that are able to compete with Japan and China and countries that are excelling in math and
Mhm.
science? So I think there is a lot of value, and it's just really, it's more of a call for reform. It might even really be a greater problem with our our society, because I think really, I mean, the problems that you identify, like with the measuring achievement and not ability, those could be, you could apply those arguments to the workplace or the job market as well. You know, there's a lot of people who are into the whole workforce politics thing. One thing that, like, if you ever read, like, say, the art of not the art of power, the 48 laws of power, one of the things that the author talks about in the 48 laws of power is that you don't want your boss to know that you're smarter than they are. You want them to think that you don't want them to think that there's anything about you that's special or that you have any special ability. You actually want them to think that you are a dolt who will do everything that they tell you to do until the time comes for you to stab them in the back and take their job. That's literally what the art of power tells you. And it's very, it's not really a new concept. It's very Machiavellian, and there's people have been. It's just and Nietzsche. It's just regurgitating the end justifies the means, and I think that's really what these tests are. They're doing the same thing. They're telling you not to just. They're measuring how well you follow the rules,
Mhm.
for better or worse. So
Okay.
I'll pass it back
Mhm.
to you.
Okay. So I think I'll just get back to your point about teachers. How do you know teachers are underperforming and everything? I think there are two major problems that you are that when we actually are using a standardized test to use this, I think there are two major problems that exist with this. The first would be that we like know that we have different, like, kind of like, an educational environment in every classroom. And now, like, it's, I mean, if in case, like, it's a maybe a Western culture, even in terms of, like, even in America itself, there are different, like, instructional quality in every classroom. There are different ways of doing it, different ways the teacher actually conveys, and then there are different ways as a student response. So it just depends on, like, even in terms of America, it depends on state to state. So when you compare it on a wider level, now it differentiates very well on, like, Western culture, Eastern culture, or maybe, like, it's a huge differentiation that exists. So I think measurement regarding, like, in terms of standardized tastes, like, to whether or not to like identify those teachers are performing well or not is very foolish, because, as I said, the instructional quality, the way your educational environment is carried out, differentiates everywhere. And then it's foolish to actually create that comparison, because it's not a fair comparison. Now, secondly, is that what happens if, in case, what is happening when these kind of, like, standardized tests are trying to, like, incorporate all, like, these schools, or maybe, like, incorporate, in a way that it could be fair. So what it is doing is that it is just, like, it is trying to compile everything, like, it is actually trying to compile everything, just in case, to make sure that, like, those all areas are included. Now, what happens is that with this, like, it's oh, I'm not explaining it properly, but the fact is that, like, it is just putting a lot of ideas together, and then in the name of, like, creating a mix, or, like, it is not being able to handle it, like, it is not being able to incorporate all those instructional qualities, all those, like, educational, like, materials that come from different side of the world, and different cultures, and, like, different motivations for education. So it's just the main core idea on this is that it is not a fair comparison, whether or not to compare if the teachers are underperforming, or maybe the students themselves, because it's just it. it is a huge differentiation, and there are so many external factors that come along with it that standardized tastes are not able to measure. And I think, okay, when let me just go ahead with this one about the wrong differentiation. I think the problem with this is that it creates an like, so the standardized tastes, those are the instruments that is actually created to see if in case there is a valid norm reference interpretations regarding a chunk of content. As I say, like there's this chunk of content and everyone else is answering the same question, and then that's how you are actually getting an interpretation of a student, how the student can perform. So what happens is that answers answers those are questions that are answered correctly by roughly half of the students, they avoid those items that answered correctly by too many students or few students. Now what they do is that they carefully sample the content and concentrating on the items that have been like, so as I said, it's a comparison, it's a standard, it is done in a predetermined and standard manner. So now what they do is that now in terms of when they start like carefully sampling the content or sampling the like result of all of it, I think it just creates a lot of distortion in actually in the in the you know in the course itself. And then now the fact is that when the sampling occurs, then even if you are arguing that it actually helps the student, like in terms of getting, in terms of like knowing the ability or maybe achievement, when you say that they can actually carefully assess their performance, I think it is not being assessed, because this is all a sampling, this is all a rigorous process of like the process itself of standardized tastes. And I think it's very unfair for to actually compare the one student's content mastery. I'd not even say it like creativity. I would just say that there is a certain content on this one, and they are just learning to master this content again and again. So it's very unfair to compare one student's content mastery with that of students worldwide. And the next problem existing with this is that if you see in maths, there's 15 in geometry, there's 15 marks in computation, and 15 in algebra. I think it doesn't make sense, because it is covering too few items to allow meaningful, like within the subject comparison as well, like of weakness and strength. It is doing nothing, because those are like too few items to allow any meaningful, like conclusion out of those. So it's just not helping out. And my main idea is that it should not be used to evaluate the quality of the education, or it should not be used to like predict a quality of the education coming from an individual, because I think it's, even if you're putting high stakes on it, it's not like worthy enough. Hmm.
That really, I think it still falls into that area of I think of a need for reform, and not elimination. Uh, because I'll just go through the contentions as I heard them. Uh, because uh, if there's no way, I mean, how do you know that there's equality in every classroom? How do you know that? I mean, what if a teacher isn't performing? And the example that I think of offhand is there was a high school science teacher, because a lot of the goal of this is to get American students to excel in science. There is a science teacher here in Central Ohio, about an hour north of me. In his science class, he was not only teaching evolution, he actually got fired. Not evolution, I'm sorry. He was teaching creationism. He was teaching the students religion, creationism, Christian creationism in the classroom, in the public classroom. He was not only doing that, he was as an experiment. He was I don't know what the experiment was exactly, but the reason he got fired was he was actually having the students burn a tattoo of a cross in their arms. So is there now? This isn't. I know this isn't a debate about how of evolution or creation or anything like that. But is that really equality? as I mean, is when that student goes to apply for college or enter the workforce, or whatever the case is, and that he needs to know science as part of, or he or she needs to know science as part of that. What are they going to benefit from from having they burn a cross in their arm? So uh, uh, and I think it does need. I mean, if you're going to say that I want to improve education, because that could be. I mean, I'm not a fan of George Bush, obviously, but how is George Bush? I mean, how is and I'm not going to say that No Child Left Behind isn't a failure. That I like No Child Left Behind, but the thing is, how is he going to say well, I'm going to do something to make education better. I'm going to do something to make America more competitive with Japan and China, and we're gonna be better at science and math, so we're gonna lead industry, and so how is he gonna do that? Um, uh, and some things can't be measured, but it's not. But I think that kind of goes back to my art school example. So you have this year that's it's just complete agony. There really isn't much that's creative about it. Everything about it is quantitative, and it's the same thing. You got to learn all these art theory concepts and then regurgitate them. But the value of that is that once you get through that year or two doing that, you're empowered to use your creativity to make much better artwork. I mean, everyone notices a difference in their art. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. I mean, I think going through that first year is as grueling as it is. The joke that we used to say is that's like going through the Matrix, because all of a sudden you see, you learn about human anatomy, and you're drawing human anatomy. So you see everyone as a skeleton. You see the muscle structure of everyone else. You learn about perspective. All of a sudden you see lines everywhere. Everything's in perspective. You see the perspective lines everywhere. Every time you look at a painting, you notice how the warm colors come forward and the cool colors recede. So everything that's warm comes forward, everything that's cool goes backwards. So those are all theories and concepts that you learn, that if you were just gonna sit down and paint, you would. I mean, maybe you could eventually you would find it out on your own, because there's plenty of famous artists who didn't go through this training, but you're that much further ahead because you already know these things, and I think that can be applied to these tests and entering college, or entering the workforce. And what if, and how do you know if a student's underperforming? Because a grade, there's a difference between a score and a grade. The score is just how did you perform on this assessment, whereas a grade is supposed to be how did you perform, how was your performance overall, and of course you have a relationship with your teacher, as opposed to the bureaucracy of somebody's in a room somewhere scoring this test. The thing is that teachers, I don't think anyone would disagree with me on this, is that teachers have a lot of bias towards students. They have students. I mean, I'm not saying this is every teacher, but I think we all know of a teacher that we had who had a bias or an opinion that they applied toward their students. So how would you know? I mean, let's say that there's a student who actually the teacher isn't giving them a good grade because they don't get along with the teacher, and they just don't like the class, and that happens. But they score better on this test in this area than their peers do. Are the opposite. I mean, how would you know that there's something wrong with the way that teacher is performing? That the student obviously understood this and learned just as well as the other students did, but he didn't get the same grade. The example that I think of is, there's a teacher I liked a lot, but I remember one time I was upset because I didn't get the grade that I wanted on the test, and there was someone who actually had a poor grade on the test, but he actually laughed and admitted that because he was the football coach and that student played football, that he might have given him a better grade just so he could play football that week. I was pretty upset about that. So those things happen, and I'm sure when we took the test, I'm sure I got a better score than that other student did too on the test. Um, uh, so I think it can help the students, and it is a way of comparing. And I don't believe it's perfect at all. I absolutely do believe it needs reform, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I can't say that there shouldn't be a test.
Okay. So I think when you say like how do you know the quality of education or how teachers are underperforming or overperforming, I don't think the standardized tests are actually doing it. Because as I said, there are so many external factors that are working on it. So if in case, as you said, a teacher is doing a bad job, like um or the right way, I mean, the right way would be a conversation between the college and the administration, or the students and the administration. I don't know like how the standardized tests are actually a correct way of doing it, because as I said, there are so many external factors working on it. So when you said like your friend, like one of your friends or one of the students actually got a higher score, even though like not being much of a good student, so that is exactly what is going to happen, like even in terms of standardized tests as well. Because as I said, there are so many external factors working on it, the factors that maybe some students cannot be working under the pressure of exam, even though they have a good, like even though they are like, they are good enough. And what happens is that when you have so high stakes of this kind of examinations, even like cheating and everything is like, it is high in probability. And even though they are trying to maintain a uniform state for these exams, I have seen those things happening, being a taste taker myself. And so, like when there are so high stakes for this kind of things, like there are so many other factors that incorporate itself. As I said, even cheating is a problem, because people, because it's about getting into college, like it's about, so that thing. So my main problem with this debate is that how, like the factor that it is defining or determining an educational, like possibility, or maybe an educational opportunity for a student, and using standardized tests to do this is a prop, like is totally unfair. That is what my, like is what is my that is what my idea revolves around. And I think when we say that, so this kind of tastes were invented for a certain reason, as you also said it, that like it's about creating equal opportunities for all students, but it is leaving the unprivileged backgrounds behind. It is actually so like it is actually creating a privilege for the people who have a good socioeconomic background, and it is actually leaving people who do not have that. So if you see now children like rich children, or maybe like privileged children, they have they can actually get the expensive preparation classes. They have so many resources to go through. They are already like, because since they're going into privatized education, they're already so good at English, or like this kind of things that just comes along so well with these kind of students. But this does not happen with the underprivileged group, and they have to go through the same test, as I said, the same way for everyone. So now the quality that the standardized tests were created for has not been a reality, because now those kind of students who come from the public school background, and those students who do not have a good English background, or maybe who are not capable enough of getting into preparation classes or anything, like so I mean it's definitely unfair to them. It's a so it's not a good comparison, as I said, like because you're incorporating people from different parts of life and different like sectors of life, and then the content you have, or maybe the way these are, like these are being administered, it's not good. And when we say that this kind of tastes are challenging, this kind of tastes are not challenging, but I think mentally pressurizing. Because if you see, I've seen one student like taking this taste for 3 times, and then like, so even though the person has taken this like taste 3 times, not necessarily they have increased their score or anything. And I think it creates like, so when actually my sister came back from her first taste, like came back from a first taste, and she told me that, like this was the most she could do. What she told me was that even if I'm going to try it like 3 times or 4 times, this is the most I can do. So like so what this is because, like it's so, I mean, as I said, like it's the pressure. I mean, you have time limits and everything, and then the content is very confined. So you are challenging yourself for to give a taste, not to learn something. And I think that's a problem with it. And then it never determines how a student is going to do in college. And ooh, you have a cat.
Yeah, he'll knock the camera out. It's not a ghost; it's a cat that knocks the camera out. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, so
Are you?
those were like kind of my things. Like, I'll just like summarize it so that you can do it quickly. And yes, I think the main idea is that it can definitely not actually predict or predict how a student is going to perform, because like, there's problems, and there are students who come from an unrelated area, or as I said, underprivileged groups. And maybe like even if in case my subject area is not actually like could be like maths or English, like I should perform the taste anyway. So now that's another thing, that is an extended pressure. Students prepare for 2 years ahead. And I think something that comes with like so much of preparation actually loses creativity. Now it actually, would be distorting the creativity of people, and then it's not progressive. As I said, it's the same question, the question bank, like repeatedly, like getting back to the same flow. So it's not even progressive. And now what happens to the community is that there are people like the minority group or maybe underprivileged group who are deprived of the education, deprived of these the many opportunities that comes along with the standardized taste, maybe no preparation classes and all. And it is not definitely not measuring their ability, which is my next thing. And then even in terms of schools, like so maybe sometimes, like as I said, like students, I mean, there it is not a good measure for me, like for actually predicting how a student is doing or how a teacher is doing, because they come from different instructional quality from their, like maybe even in their, like high school, like when they as they grow up, like there are so many different instructional qualities they come across, so many different educational, like backgrounds they actually experience. So I think it is very unfair to like measure it just in the terms of one taste. And the next thing, as I said, it's a kind of an instrument. As I said, like there are so many things that goes along with it. It's all about sampling. It's all about, like so they actually they actually just calculate the roughly half of the answers, like roughly half of the students are like answering, and they avoid items that are answered correctly by too many or few students. So like this kind of sampling happens, which actually already distort the processing. And I think there's a huge contradiction between what is tasted and what is taught. So what is taught in the schools are not actually what other things those are tasted. Only a small fraction of it. So 50 to 80% of those things those are taught in school is not actually tasted in those kind of exams. So what happens is that you have to divert entirely out of your context. I can not maybe not entirely, but like 90 or 60 or 70% of out of your context to actually prepare for this taste now, which puts an extra pressure. Uh all those things. So it should not be used to evaluate the quality of education, nor should it be used to evaluate or predict how a student can perform, because it's not worthy enough, and it's not like trustable enough on this basis. Yep, I think you could. Yep, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay. Um, I think that the difference is that I believe in reform as opposed to elimination. There's a couple new arguments that I want to go ahead and rebut first. The one is the one is that you're saying that someone had to take the test 3 times. I actually had to take one of these tests 3 times myself, and I blame my teacher. And I really wanted to pass the test. And as soon as I got a better teacher, I passed the test. So it is that teacher was underperforming. How would you know otherwise? How would you have something to compare and say, well, I could pass the test, you just
Okay,
weren't.
just a quick thing on
Yeah,
this one. Okay, so I think it depended on the instructional quality. Like you were like I mean you wanted, or you were like capable of grabbing. So there could be a different student who could actually grab the same teacher's instructional quality. So I think it just depends on individual in terms of this. Yeah, if we just go ahead.
I don't know anyone who did in my anecdotal situation. I think the other thing that you said is that It's not progressive. The thing is, and I'm just going by the model here in Ohio. I don't know. I assume, well, it's federal money. It's granted through federal money, so I think it's safe to assume it's a federal program, and it's based on income, not race as well. So students who live in lower income areas, they actually have after school programs and tutoring and all this sort of thing with the same goal, that the grants are written around the idea that the student will improve their performance by a letter grade or higher and pass these tests. And the privatization